Hi, in this video you'll learn the basics of 3ds Max. My name is Mike and I'm teacher at VizAcademy. Videos like this are just a part of our training. Our classes are based on 4 very important connected elements. The first element is online conferences 3 times a week, where we discuss the work of our students individually, each time improving its quality. You will also see how others prepare their individual projects. Thanks to that, you will draw knowledge from completely different angle. The second is video tutorials just like this one. In them, we will show you our special techniques of working in 3ds Max. We have over 12 years of experience in this program. In addition to training, our team is constantly working in the industry creating architectural visualizations. The third element is the daily work with individual tutors who will help you with your tasks, answering your questions and showing you step-by-step solutions. They are available to you every day without restrictions. You will definitely like them. The fourth element are tasks prepared specially for you, which are written in a very clear and easy digestible way. We train beginners as well as advanced users, so you can be sure that if you are using 3ds Max for the first time or you want to improve your skills, you will be able to show beautiful visualizations at the end of our training. If you don't believe me, check out our social media. There you'll find work done by our students during our training. Over 75% of students started without prior knowledge of 3ds Max and rendering. Okay, now let's get started with the video. This is a very easy but necessary 3ds Max tutorial. It will ensure that our work will go flawlessly. So let's get started. First thing you notice when trying to work with 3ds Max is that its UI is a little bit complicated. The first time when I opened 3ds Max, all I did was mash a little bit of buttons around, not knowing anything. I created a box and I left 3ds Max for 2 weeks. I didn't go back to it for 14 days. And it's just a very confusing program at first, but you're going to avoid this. Your story is going to be totally different because this time we're going to be here to tell you exactly what to do and what to click for the first weeks. What we are also going to do is tell you exactly what to not press, because as you can see, we cut out some of the parts of the UI, and this is pretty much going to be almost everything that we will need for this task. And as you can see, we've got Q, W, E, and R, S. Those are shortcuts for all of those functions that we have listed. And we're going to go through all of those in just a second. Let's jump into 3ds Max. Starting from the left side, we have our selection options. If you hold this icon for a little bit longer with your left mouse button, you will see that you have 5 options to pick: rectangular selection, circular selection, fence, lasso, and spray. If you click your Q button multiple times, it's going to circle through them. Next, we have manipulation tools. Those are going to be very handy when trying to move, rotate, and scale your object. So let's start from W. That's the movement tool. When grabbing one of those 3 handles, you can move your object at any way you like. You can also select pairs of those axes and move your object in 2 axes at the same time. There's also an option to move your object in all 3 axes at the same time, but that is just not going to be that consistent. So let's move on to our rotation tool, which is E. Now, this is going to have the very consistent system, because as you can see, the red is actually your x-axis, while green is your y-axis and blue is your z-axis. The same will also translate to our scaling. When dealing with scaling, you must remember that this tool also has multiple options. So it has the uniform scaling, non-uniform scaling, and pretty much this weird type of scaling that you can pretty much call a cartoony style. Now, we're going to mostly use our non-uniform scale, and this way we can scale our object in any axis as we want, and of course with the pairs. So let's just remember that multiple clicks on R are also going to circle through your scaling tool. So remember, if you are experiencing some weird effects that you didn't really plan for, just hold on your mouse button a little bit longer and select the first one. Next to our manipulation tools, we have snap toggles. So to show you how they work, it's simply best to create another object, press S to turn it on, and now you can see that I can grab parts of my object and pretty much snap one of those objects to another one. Yes, it's going to be that easy. Now let's move on to another tool which is very helpful, especially when working with interiors and overall architecture. So we've got angle snap toggle. This is going to allow you to rotate your objects in intervals of 5 degrees. Usually when this is off, your rotation is going to be a little bit random. You can see that this number is not really ideal for your future precise work. So we're just going to try to keep this on as much as possible. Now, next to those two tools, we have this one small mirror option. But to show you how it works, I'm going to create a teapot instead of a box because we wouldn't really see what's happening. So mirror is going to allow you to not only pretty much rotate your object, but in reality is actually mirroring it. So it can create a copy, instance, or reference. I'm going to go in detail about the differences between those options a little bit later in later videos. Now, we can also set the offset for our mirror axis, so you will be able to create those mirrors at will. Now, mirror is going to be one of those tools that is not really that often used, but it's also good to know that there's an option like that. Now we have our material editor. Material editor is going to be something very, very important later on. Right now, we're not going to spend a lot of time in it because we're just not going to work with materials. But this is the place where we will be creating all of those beautiful materials, all of those colors and textures for our models. Here we have render setup. This is going to be also very important later on, and we're going to slowly but gradually move into all of those areas to understand what we are doing. Right now, this is just gibberish, so let's close it. As all professional software usually really runs, F9 is so-called compute. In our program, 3ds Max, it's going to be render. So if you hit Shift F9, it's going to pretty much start rendering. Unfortunately, right now we don't have any light systems on, so we are not going to render for now. And remember, we're not rendering yet, so you don't have to really do anything. But what we can do now is move on to this small bracket around here. Here we've got a lot of very handy tools. One of them is field of view, which is going to allow you to pretty much widen or tighten your field of view. Very useful for interiors. And Alt-W shortcut, which is going to allow you to enlarge your viewport. Very, very, very helpful when working with precise models and you just want to zoom in on some detail. One very handy option here is also zoom extends, that's with shortcut Z. So when you have multiple objects in your scene and you're a little bit lost, you can always, let's say, press Z. So it's going to zoom out and show you everything in your scene at the same time. But if you select one of those objects, you will quickly see that now I'm zooming in on this one object. We've got this orbit option, which is very, very handy to rotate around your object, but you can pretty much do the same by holding the left Alt and your middle mouse button. Now, as you can see, I'm rotating around this without the need of clicking here. And this pretty much sums up all those buttons that I wanted to talk with you, but there's also one panel left to talk about. creation panel is pretty much where you will be creating your objects. So we get a lot of options. First is box, cone, and everything else. More about it later. Right now I'm just showing you a little bit of options, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. So this is the geometry creation panel, shapes creation panel, lights creation panel, camera creation panel, and a little bit of junk that we're not going to use, at least for now. Here we've got options to modify. Also, this is the place where you add modifiers. This is going to be very important because this is the place where we will be changing some of the values or properties of our objects. So let's say, for instance, I can add a little bit of segments right now, or I can just add any kind of modifiers. But let's not get ahead of us. Here we've got the hierarchy, which will allow you to move the pivot of your object. So you can treat this as your gravity center. When you move it somewhere outside your default object's position, you will be able to rotate your object along this new pivot. So it will open a lot of options for you later on when you will be just pretty much working with 3ds Max. Now, the hierarchy is going to be one of those options that we will need you to master to some extent, but it's not going to be really that demanding. Here we've got utilities, and all of those options are not going to be very handy other than perspective and reset X form. Also, I use measure. Measure is going to tell you quickly the size of your object, so it's just going to be a very handy tool. Now, this pretty much sums up every window that we're going to use in 3ds Max in our daily work. And I think that being able to cover it so quickly only proves that it's going to be fun to work with and, well, easy to digest. Now, let's make sure that your 3ds Max is properly set up. First thing you want to do is go for Customize, Preferences, or you can go to File, Preferences. There are two ways to get in there, but honestly, both are going to lead you to the same place, so you don't really have to, you remember one. Now, we've got this General tab. In here, we will really have to remember a few things. First of all, Scene Undo. How many times you can do Control Z is related to this undo levels. I usually work with 20 or 50 steps because I like to go back a little bit, and just being able to move back 50 steps in the 3ds Max is really a good idea sometimes. Now, make sure that submaterials, this assign automatically, is off. More about it later, especially in materials part, but trust me, you don't need it. Here in this tab, we don't need to change almost anything unless you've got this texture coordinates on. If you have this on, turn it off. That's very important because otherwise a lot of textures and modifiers are going to behave a little bit different to what we are going to show you. So make sure that this window is pretty much set up the same way as I do have. Now, Files. In this tab, we don't really change a lot again because the only area that we're interested in is auto backup. Auto backup is going to be saved in your C user documents 3ds Max auto backup. I'm going to show you how to access it later on because, well, it's going to be very handy, especially that 3ds Max likes to crash from time to time. Always have your auto backup enabled. It saved my life many times. Just imagine that your scene randomly crashes or your computer turns off and you lost all day of work. Well, auto backup is going to have your backup, so it is very good to have it. I usually work with 10 or more auto backups at a time because with interval of 5 minutes, it's pretty much going to fill up all the auto saves and start saving over another one just in 50 minutes. So you may want to increase this number. Remember that if you don't have a lot of space on your C drive, this is going to be a little bit heavy on your computer, but as long as your scene is not 500 megabytes or more, you can keep the interval of 5 minutes because it's not going to take you that long. Now, in this window, we do not change anything. At least we don't have to. Viewports, well, it's already set up. The only thing that I want you to make sure that you have on is enable gamma LUT correction. In this case, it is very important for us that you have this on. Older version of 3ds Max may have this off, especially those below 2016. There's not many companies using this, but well, sometimes they do have those older versions of 3ds Max unupdated, so just make sure that it's on. Okay, so this is pretty much all for the preferences, but we're also going to go again to customize, unit setup, and make sure that we're working on metric system. Again, this is important because all of the models that you're going to load in your scenes are going to come in some kind of scaling. So make sure that you change from any kind of system that you have here to metric, centimeters, and again here to centimeters, and make sure that you pretty much have the same settings as I do right now. Click OK and OK. The very last step I want you to take is to go to, again, customize, custom defaults switcher, and make sure that you've got max selected here. You can also select the light version of or the dark version of 3ds Max. Both are identical, but one is just a little bit darker. We work on the dark mode. So once this is selected, remember to select max. In the beginning, when you were installing 3ds Max, you probably seen this window. Would you like to work on classic, on design? I believe that a lot of you are going to click on design because you are designers. Unfortunately, we want to work on the classic version because most of the industry works this way, and thanks to that, we will be able to pretty much quickly adapt to any environment when working with 3ds Max. Once you selected your color and selected the max, click set, wait for the custom scheme to load, and now remember, you still have to turn off and on 3ds Max, so all those settings that you just changed are going to be saved as default. Now restart your 3ds Max, turn it on back again in a minute, and what you can do is pretty much move on to the next video, because this is all for this introduction to 3ds Max UI, and see you in another video.